Mr. Corey, welcome. And thank you for being here. And I take note of your comments that you've invested about $18 billion, according to your website, $17.9 billion, and you've got terms out potentially for another $10 billion. So out of a $35 billion allocation, you've allocated 18 and you might allocate 10 more. And yet the government has come and given you 10 billion more in this allocation for your needs or your wants down the road here about what you want to do to move forward an agenda that, can we say, might not be working, and I'll ask you some questions on that. But $18 billion, is this reflected anywhere in the government's deficit, first of all?
So, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. The way the CIB works, as the member points out, the CIB receives the allocation, the appropriation from government. As we make loans, we draw on our appropriation and loan that money to borrowers, and then we get paid back over time. The long-term fiscal impact of this should be, in our modeling, positive for the country.
If I can just quickly move there, if you were to do an audit of your investments right now, how many of them, of the $18 billion you've put out, would you have $18 billion of assets if they were accounted for on a valuation basis at this point in time?
Thank you for the question. So in our current, interesting question, in our current modeling, when you net three things, our investments minus all of our operating costs historically to date, minus any losses on loans for projects that have had challenges or risk, plus the interest we've currently accrued, our $18 billion, using round numbers, Madam Chair, would be something in the range, I believe, of $17.8 billion, so slightly below. When you forecast the interest to be earned from all of the existing loans, though, we are growing that portfolio, and our financial audited statements would show that over time we will be positive to the fiscal plan.
Let me ask about some in particular here, and let's go into your government. This last week gave another $1.5 billion. I presume that's on top of the $10 billion for your electrification network strategy, but you've already been involved heavily in electrification through school buses, we call zero emission buses. And looking at your investments, particularly with Lion Electric in Quebec, it looks like your investments have been a abject failure because the company has gone bankrupt. So $50 million of money from the Strategic Investment Fund went into Lion Electric, along with $140 million of money from the government of Quebec to a company that quickly did a pump and dump, and the president took out $33 million and put it in his own pocket just before the company went bankrupt. To suggest that this is a success as far as your electric vehicle strategy goes, electric bus strategy, would be a stretch, wouldn't you say?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Two things. Electric vehicle charging networks I'll talk about, and then I'll discuss fleets, if I may, Madam Chair. On charging, just to clarify, the announcement in the auto strategy that came out last week increased the government's target for us to invest up to $1.5 billion in electric vehicle charging. That is not new money. That is of our $45 billion as requested in the budget. That is the government as shareholder saying, of your $45 billion portfolio, we expect in the long term $1.5 billion of that to be in electric vehicle chargers. Previously, that target had been lower, and so they're just increasing that target from $500 million to $1.5 billion. We're a portfolio that's investing in sectors, and so government's job is to tell us where we should prioritize and how to allocate that portfolio between trade or energy or EV charging. So that's what the question. EV charging money is for.
No. So the question is, effectively, has this been a success as far as what you've shown in zero electric buses?
Thank you. So on fleets, just the question conflates two things. So just to be clear, we have no loans to Lion Electric or investments in them. Our loans are to the owners and operators of electric fleets, municipalities, municipal transit corporations, private bus, school bus operators, for example, so that they can accelerate their transition from diesel to non-emitting fleets. And this program has been taken up by, as I say, municipal fleet operators and school bus operators across the country. There are over 5,000 buses under procurement and will be on the road. We think it's a success. Those buses are being bought from a range of companies, many Canadian, and creating supply chain and jobs. So yes, we think the program is a success.
Thank you. Well, let me point out that in the Lion electric vehicles were pulled off the road because they were catching fire. The last thing I want to put my kids on when I send them to school is a bus that catches fire. Would you agree with that quickly?
Our job is to support fleet operators, municipal companies and school bus operators in making their fleet choices. We're a lender to their projects, but our job is to help them accelerate fleet investment and transition.
Yes. Thank you. I noticed you did invest in a fleet operator called Highland Electric Fleets, which is based in Beverly, Massachusetts. $50 million of Canada Infrastructure Bank money went to a U.S. company this past year. So effectively, we're subsidizing a U.S. arranger at this point in time to actually buy buses for fleets potentially in Canada, potentially elsewhere.
Thank you,
Any
Mr.
comments?
McLean. That concludes your time. We will continue.
You talked about the $50 to $55 million that you've loaned, as you would say, to the Beverly, Massachusetts Highland Electric Fleets. You've also loaned $400 million to Quebec Bus Carriers Foundation, and you've loaned $15 million to Autobus Seguin. But there's more than $1 billion that's gone out to these zero-emission buses, and I suppose some of those may include Lion Electric buses as well. The ones that definitely include Lion Electric buses, would you say that those loans are a write-off at this point in time, including the one to the U.S. company?
Madam Chair, if I may, maybe just to address the question and also addresses the member's question at the tail end of his last comments. To be very clear, every one of our investments are in or partly in Canada, meaning if it was a bridge between Canada and the U.S., we could invest in that. But it must be infrastructure that's in Canada, and it must be infrastructure that benefits Canadians. Now, the owners of that, the companies that deliver that, we live in a global world. There are companies that come from around the world and do business in Canada, and as Canadians, we benefit that. But our loans benefit Canadians and Canadians only. So in the earlier question, they could not use the loan, for instance, to buy buses that would be on the roads in the U.S. They must benefit Canadians. That's the purpose of our financing is and always is.
Is it a write-off?
Madam Chair, to the second part of the question, sorry, our financial statements are very clear about what are our current financial write-offs, but I can confirm that most of our investments in electric fleets continue to be viable investments, and we intend to collect.
To the president of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank that Lion Electric went bankrupt. So any money that was going into their taxpayer money that funded the acquisition of these vehicles is effectively nil at this point in time. And I'll pivot here, if you don't mind, Mr. Corey, because there was actually an arrangement made behind the scenes with Lion Electric Vehicles, which included a bank syndication with Bank of Montreal. BMO is one of the signatories on there. Interesting there is that BMO, Bank of Montreal, has an arrangement with Export Development Corporation to make sure that they never have to suffer any losses on their loan portfolio. So effectively, it is the people of Canada underwriting bad investments that are facilitated by your organization without any oversight. Is this proper due diligence on your organization's part, or are you part of the effort to kind of work through the capital here and make sure Canadian taxpayers are always at risk in these programs?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I'll say this. We conduct on every loan full due diligence. Our borrowers, in the case of electric fleets, our borrowers who are the fleet operators sign on to acquiring electric buses, decarbonizing their transportation, and paying us back out of the operating savings that come in reduction in fuel use, reduction of maintenance. And so that's the due diligence we focus on and do on each and every investment.
It looks like you've written off $50 million of a loan to a U.S. entity that was going to look at doing some business in Canada. And you've written off what might be $400 million for another investment in electric vehicles in Quebec and another $15 million, and probably more of this whole fleet, zero electric buses concept that you've lent towards. The beneficiaries of this, of course, are a bunch of intermediaries. And with Lion Electric, as we've clearly shown, the beneficiaries were the insiders. Now, is one of those insiders Andre-Lise Matteau on your board?
Madam Chair, I have, first of all, just to dispute the very premise of the question, I've never said anything. Your comments about what we have or haven't written off are not matched. So let's to be clear, those are not all projects we've written off.
Bankrupt company, you haven't written off your investment in them.
We don't have an investment in that company. I think, Madam Chair, I've been quite clear. I don't have a loan to them. So the premise of the question doesn't feel.
Loan to the people that were arranging to buy those vehicles.
We have a loan to people arranging to buy non-emitting buses and put them on the road. And by the way, this is an important point. The way our loans all work, when we sign a financing agreement, the agreement is that they can draw money as they actually make progress, as buses are on the road. Or to pick a different example, if I made a loan to someone doing broadband, I may make a $100 million finance agreement. They only draw money as they build the infrastructure.
What's the write-off?
Our financial statements are very clear on what write-offs we do and don't take. I'm happy to provide those to the committee if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. Thank you, Mr. McLean. That concludes
For
the
that,
time.
we will continue with Mr. McLean for 45 seconds.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Corey. Back where we were. The issue we have here is that your organization acts as a more or less facilitator for insiders to make a lot of money, including Marc-Andre Bedard, who made $33 million by extracting his shares out of Lion Electric, while the government, through strategic investment funds and your organization, were pumping money into the organization, more or less lifting it up, and therefore, no business case whatsoever at that point in time. People made money, people on the inside made money, including people that were on your board. Do you have any due diligence that looks after these things, any conflict of interest procedures that you need to look at?
That concludes your time. Thank you, Mr. McLean. We will continue with Mr. Fragiscatos for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Corey, first of all, thank you for your public service at both the provincial and federal level. Anything you wish to clear up here, sir? There's been a lot of accusations. We just heard conjecture, what amounts to conjecture, I think. Anything you wish to put on the table that I think would allow for a fair testimony to be on the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I think I would, if it's okay, I'd love to address the question of conflict of interest. It's a very important one. It's one we take extremely seriously. I'm going to pass to my colleague, Mr. Jiguet, to just talk about how we do ensure that in all of our investments, we meet the highest standard of ethical review, due diligence, and conflict of interest checks.
So to confirm the, Madam Chair, the member's question, we do not have an agreement with Lion Electric. I think that has been said several times by Mr. Corey. With respect to conflict of interest, as Mr. Corey says, we adopt the highest standards in public sector governance with respect to conflict of interest. All of our directors are not only subject to the Conflict of Interest Act in Canada, they're also subject to a conflict of interest code for directors that goes beyond the requirements of disclosure under the Conflict of Interest Act. Before every committee, we provide a very detailed list of all the projects that are submitted to our board for approval. That includes all of the counterparties, not just the borrower, but other counterparties that would be part of a project, because in project financing, you'll generally have a major construction company or other companies that are part of material contracts with respect to that project. Directors review that project list, proactively disclose any relationships that they would have with respect to any of these counterparties on investments, and we manage conflicts in meetings consistent with the requirements of the Conflict of Interest Act, with recusal, which includes leaving the room and not participating in any discussion and voting on matters. So we're happy to, and we have more information on that in our annual report with respect to our process and our disclosures, as well as our codes of conduct that are also available on our website.